I used to talk to my dead brother, he told me terrifying secrets. I grew up in a quiet town in the late 1980s, where my parents were always protective of me, almost excessively so. They never let me out of their sight, and would often overreact to small things, thinking the worst would happen. My dad especially, always seemed tense, like he was constantly waiting for something to go wrong. My mom, on the other hand, was more distant. She would often retreat into her books or her knitting, and I learned early on to avoid asking too many questions. Before I was born, they had another child, Noah. He was their pride and joy, the boy they had always hoped for. But when he was 12, Noah disappeared, just vanished. I never got to meet him, but from the way my parents talked about him, I could tell he was the complete opposite of me. Noah was spontaneous, full of energy and brave, always challenging the rules, pushing boundaries. My dad adored that about him. My mom, however, often seemed worried about his recklessness. When Noah went missing, my parents spiraled into a deep grief. They searched for him tirelessly for months, but with no answers, the search was abandoned. The police stopped investigating after a year, and my parents, devastated and exhausted, did the same. But their grief never quite went away. It hung in the house, like a shadow that I couldn't shake off. A year later, I was born, and it wasn't long before I felt like something was off. Growing up in a house that was haunted by an absence you couldn't quite name, it was suffocating at times. My parents never talked about Noah after that. They mentioned him only occasionally, in whispered tones, as though bringing him up would reopen a wound they could never heal. When I was little, I started to talk to someone who wasn't there. I would sit in my room for hours having entire conversations, and when my parents asked me who I was talking to, I'd simply say, "Big Brother," and they would dismiss it, thinking I was imagining things. I didn't think much of it at the time, but it felt as if someone was always watching me, always near. The first time Noah really spoke to me, I was about 6 years old. It was summer in 1992, and I was sitting alone in my room, drawing. I heard a voice, clear as day, whispering my name. "Emily," the voice called, and I turned around in surprise, but there was no one there. "Who's there?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I'm here," came the reply. "Big Brother." Noah appeared like a memory made flesh, standing right behind me. He was the same age he would have been had he still been alive. His voice was soft, but his presence felt strong, undeniable. "I've been waiting," he said, a little teasingly. "Let's go outside." I followed him to the backyard, a quiet place where I'd always loved to sit and daydream. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows over the lawn. "Dig here," he instructed, pointing to a spot near the old oak tree. My small hands eagerly worked to dig into the earth, and to my surprise, I unearthed an old, faded backpack. I held it in my hands, confused. "What's this?" Noah smiled. "You'll find out soon enough, but for now let's go inside." We went back to the house, but when I turned around to look at him, he was gone. Later that night, I was sitting on the floor, examining the backpack when my mother found me. Her face went pale when she saw it. "What are you doing with this?" she demanded, her voice sharp. There was something almost frantic in her eyes, but I couldn't understand why. "I found it with Noah," I said innocently. "He told me to dig for it." Her eyes widened, and she quickly snatched the backpack from me, her hands shaking. "There's no Noah," she said firmly, almost as if trying to convince herself more than me. "Put that away, Emily." I was confused, but I didn't press the issue. After that, I buried the memory of Noah's visit. I tried to forget, tried to follow the rules my parents set, but deep down, I felt a growing sense of unrest. Noah was out there, somewhere, and he wasn't going to leave me alone. When I was 9, in 1994, I started to see him again. But this time, he seemed different, more serious. He wasn't the playful, teasing brother I remembered. He had grown somehow, and his presence was more intense, more urgent. "I know you're looking for answers," he said one afternoon as I sat in my room, searching for something that would explain everything. "It's time to understand." He led me to my dad's study, where the old computer was still sitting on the desk, a relic of the past. The screen flickered as I typed, guided by Noah's words. I searched for his name, and the first link that came up was an old news article from the local newspaper. Noah Thompson, 12, was reported missing from his home in Evergreen, Oregon, on April 10, 1982. His family believes he was abducted, but no evidence has been found. The case remains unsolved. I stared at the article, my mind racing. "That's you," I whispered, not sure if Noah would hear me. He was right behind me. "It's all hidden, everything is." "I don't understand," I said. But Noah didn't answer. Instead, he handed me the backpack again. The one from years ago. The same one I had buried in the backyard. I opened it slowly. Inside there were old documents, photos, passports, birth certificates, all stamped and official, as if they were meant to be hidden. Everything pointed back to Noah. "This was buried for a reason," he said, his voice almost sorrowful. "But now you have to face it." I had always felt like something was wrong, but now I knew. I had to confront my parents about what they had done. The weight of the truth was crushing, and I didn't know how to handle it. Noah's instructions led me to a secret room hidden behind the closet wall, where I found the horrifying truth. My parents had locked Noah away, keeping him in that room for years, and then they let him die. I didn't tell anyone immediately. I wasn't sure what to do. But when the authorities took me away, I knew there was no going back. I couldn't pretend it hadn't happened. My parents, who I had always thought were overprotective and loving, had done the unthinkable. Noah was gone, but he had left me with the knowledge that I couldn't ignore. The truth would always be there, buried deep inside me, no matter how hard I tried to forget it.